finally India won the toss, and it took them 20 matches and 3 captains to do so. What do you have to say?
Well, that's right. I think that was the biggest headline. Imagine, looking at a match of an Indian team and not really discussing the best batting or the best bowling performance, but talking about something that many consider as quite inconsequential in a toss. But that's, quite contrary to what you believe about a toss. The toss has become so crucial at this time of the year when you're playing white ball cricket because, as we've seen, most places in India, the second half of the innings, there's a lot of dew. The ball becomes wet. So every time a team is bowling in the second half, they've got their backs against the wall. So it is an uphill climb for any team bowling in the second half. And that's exactly what we saw in the first two ODIs. And now looking back at all the three ODIs, remember India lost the toss in the first two games and yet managed to win that first ODI gives you an idea of how incredible that particular win by India was. That they lost the toss, they had to bowl second, and yet in that ODI in Ranchi they won. So now you can put that into perspective. But coming to the game today, you're right. It was a massive relief. We saw it on the face of the Indian captain KL Rahul as well. As soon as the toss landed in his favor, he just couldn't stop smiling. Not just because it had ended that long run of not winning tosses, but also because he knew how crucial this toss is going to be. Considering this was a decider, both teams tied 1-1. This is a decider, and you knew that as soon as the team that wins the toss, they start with almost a 70-30 advantage. So I think the smile was because of that. He knew now we start in advantageous position. And that's exactly how the game is panned out. A few things that the toss have made a huge difference with. One, of course, as you see, South Africa losing those wickets. There was a phase in the middle overs. They lost 5 wickets for just 77 runs. I think that's where India pecked them back because South Africa, the visitors, were sitting handsomely at 168 for two. From there on, it looked like 350 would be par for the course, just as we've seen throughout this series, teams getting about 300, 350, even that being chased down. So you knew you had to go upwards of 300. But from there, the bowling that the Indian bowlers did, Kuldeep Yadav, Prasidh Krishna, the two that really stood out in the performance today, has ensured that it's still halfway stage, mind you, but I think has ensured that India are in the driver's seat.
In fact, we are going to talk about that in greater detail, Nikhil. But before that, I want to ask you, South Africa bowled out for 270 for the first time in the series that they've got a below 300 score.
Well, that's exactly right. So, both the games that happened prior to this, India were batting first and they were getting almost 350. In fact, in the second ODI, they went past 350. One of those totals, they were successful in defending. The second time they could not defend. So South Africa were going past 300 quite comfortably. But I think the biggest difference was that why is it that they've been dismissed for 270? If a layman had to ask me this pointed question as to why is it that South Africa had been getting 300 and why not 300 this time, I think the simple answer to that is because for the very first time in the series, South Africa have been made to bat first. Now, many will ask, how is it that that is quite different to batting second? Because as I alluded to in my first reply, and very briefly, so I'm going to dwell a bit more on that, I think the dew factor really comes into play. What does the dew really do? We've seen the Indian bowlers, when they're bowling in the second half, the ball gets wet. And it's very tough for the Indian bowlers then, or any bowler that's bowling in the second half, to grip the ball, to get their line and their lengths right. And then once that happens, then it is the batsmen that make hay while the sun is shining. Quite contrary in this case, of course, the sun is not shining. It's exactly the opposite of it. But you get my point, right? That is the moment that they, want to score a lot of runs. So one is troublesome for the bowlers. Secondly, it's advantages to the batters, not because the bowlers are losing their line and length that I just mentioned, but also because if there is a pitch where the ball is getting a bit sticky to the pitch, it's taking time to get onto the bat. It's not allowing stroke makers or batters in the team to play some of those strokes. What this does is, as soon as the ball gets wet, the ball comes on very nicely off the pitch and then allows batters to play those strokes as well. So these two factors put together ensured South Africa got 300 plus. This is the very first time. Now, if you look back in hindsight, India batted first in both the ODIs before this, and both occasions India got past 300. I think that is what is showing you the gulf in the batting between the Indian team and South African team. Mind you, it's a big gulf, but it was in a way hidden because both times India were batting first, South Africa were chasing. This time it got reversed, so you've seen the difference, which is quite stark.
Right, and let's talk about Prasidh Krishna and Kuldeep Yadav in greater detail. The duo picked 4 wickets each, and Kuldeep Yadav has now become the highest wicket taker in the series.
Kuldeep Yadav has been in outstanding form for some time now. If you look at India's fortunes, they have kind of been running parallel to how Kuldeep Yadav has been doing on the pitch. Recently, there was a test series versus West Indies. He was the man of the series there. So whether it is red ball, whether it is white ball, he's really been India's standout bowler and the highest wicket taker. I think if you were to ask me two of India's best bowlers right now across formats, I'll say without doubt it's going to be Jasprit Bumrah and Kuldeep Yadav. Of course, remember, Jasprit Bumrah is not playing this ODI series. He'll be seen in the T20I series that is going to follow. Yet Kuldeep Yadav has taken on the mantle then to be the leading wicket taker for his team. And that's how good he has been across format. And let's get to Prasidh Krishna. And I think this game couldn't have come at a better time for Prasidh Krishna because he was under the pump. He was being criticized left, right, and center because of leaking a lot of runs. And while I agree, he has been expensive for the Indian team in different formats, even in Test cricket, he has a tendency of leaking a lot of runs. But let's not forget, alongside that, you also get his ability to get wickets. Now, I go back to Test matches in England where he was playing, he leaked a lot of runs, but then was tied with in terms of the wickets taken alongside India's number one fast bowler in Jasprit Bumrah. We see in this particular series as well, for all the India pacers that you have at the moment, he is the one with the most amount of wickets. He has been expensive. He leaks a lot of runs, but he picks up wickets. Now, if I'm captain and you give me a bowler, one who can be economical but doesn't get me wicket, on the other hand, you give me a bowler who can be expensive but gets you crucial wickets, I'll always pick the bowler. He may be expensive, but the one that gets me wicket, because eventually picking up wickets at crucial intervals is the difference between winning and losing a match. When it comes to containment, you can have many other bowlers do that particular job. So I think this game has come at the right time for Prasidh Krishna. He was under the pump, as I mentioned, and him now picking up those 4 wickets are not going to be crucial for just the Indian team moving on towards a win, which it does seem like at the moment, even though we're at the halfway stage of this particular match. But I think also personally for his career, this was much needed. If he wanted to be in the scheme of things, he needed a performance like that. So I think both these bowlers are the main reason why we found South Africa dismissed for 270. I must also tell you what Kuldeep Yadav said in that mid-innings break. And he was asked, about his wickets today, the 4 wickets that he picked. And he said, listen, for the first time in this series, I got to bowl with a dry ball because we were bowling first. So there is a new rule in the ODIs that we've seen this year being introduced, where you only now get one ball between the 34th to the 50th over. Earlier, you used to have 2 balls. What that does is allows the bowling team to choose a ball that is more scruffed up, which makes batting then difficult. And in that scenario, to get a scruffed up ball for a spinner is a blessing. And I think he enjoyed that today. He got it in the 2 previous matches, but that was bowling in the second half and the ball was wet. So he really could not take advantage of that position. This time, a dry ball, only one ball being used in the final stages of the game. And that's why I tell you, between 30th to the 48th over, when 38th to the 48th over, when South Africa were dismissed, they were only 5 down. So they've lost their final 5 wickets in that phase, where only this new rule has come in and only one ball is allowed to be used. And I think Kuldeep Yadav made full use of that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And let's now talk a little about Quinton de Kock. In fact, he hit his 7th ODI ton versus India, the South African batter who's had the best conversion rate from 50 to 100 in the ODIs.
I mean, Quinton de Kock can be in the worst form of his life. Just make him play a game against India and he comes back to life. I think that's been the one thing. I mean, he's got more than a decade-long career. He's been around for very long. But that's one thing that I've seen throughout his career, that he can be in the worst form of his life. All he needs is an Indian team to strike some form. He just enjoys playing against India. I was looking at his record playing against India. You, of course, talk about his conversion rate, which is good. But overall as well, most amount of hundreds that he's got is also against the Indian team. So he clearly enjoys batting against India. That's one thing. And his journey has also been phenomenal. A short while ago, about a year back, he had retired from all forms of the game. He had gone fishing because he said he enjoys fishing more than playing cricket. He had to be cajoled. He had to be spoken to by the South African cricket management that, listen, why don't don't you come out of retirement? Why don't you give international cricket another go for the sake of the South African team? We need a batter like you. And then he reconsidered. So he's effectively coming back into international cricket. But the way he's been batting doesn't seem like that he ever left.